You know, in the world of project management, there's one opponent that just never, ever rests: the clock. And let's be real, sometimes it feels like it's winning. So today, we're going to crack open the manager's playbook for fighting back. We're talking about a set of powerful techniques designed to get your project across that finish line when time is seriously running out.
I think we've all been there, right? That slow, sinking feeling when you realize your timeline is slipping away day by day. The deadline is this fixed point on the horizon, but the work is just not getting done fast enough. So what do you actually do? This is probably one of the most common crises a project manager can face.
Well, the professional answer is a strategy called schedule compression. And the key word here, the absolute non-negotiable part, is without reducing the scope. We're not talking about cutting features or delivering less work. No way. We're talking about finding a clever way to do all the planned work, just in less time.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at why projects even need to speed up. Then we'll get into the two main strategies to make that happen. After that, we'll cover the one rule you absolutely cannot break. And finally, we'll weigh the real costs and dangers of moving too fast.
First up, the deadline dilemma. You know, it's easy to think a project is behind schedule just because of bad planning. But honestly, the reality is often way more complicated. A lot of the pressures that force our hand come from things that are completely outside of our control.
And when you look at this list, it's pretty wild how varied these reasons are. I mean, sure, it might start with a schedule that was a bit too optimistic, but it could also be a client moving up a launch date, a sudden market opportunity you just have to grab, or a key piece of equipment breaking down. Heck, it could even be a freak weather event. Any of these can force your hand and make you find a faster way to get things done.
So, you've confirmed it. You need to speed up. Now you're standing at a fork in the road with two very different paths to choose from. And these aren't just random tactics. They're fundamentally different strategies for getting back that lost time. And believe me, each one has its own costs and consequences. So the first path is called fast tracking. Think of this as the clever, logical approach. You're not adding more stuff. You're just rethinking the sequence of the work. So, for example, in a normal plan, you might wait for a building's foundation to be 100% done before you start framing the walls. With fast tracking, you might start framing one section as soon as its foundation is ready. It's all about finding those smart overlaps. And then there's the second path, crashing. And yeah, if fast tracking is the clever move, you can think of crashing as the brute force method. You're not changing the plan's logic, you're just throwing more resources at it to make it go faster. This could mean authorizing overtime, hiring more people, or paying extra for faster delivery of materials. And this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? It perfectly shows the core trade-off. Fast tracking usually doesn't add direct costs, but wow, does it crank up your risk. If something changes in that foundation work, you might have to tear down and rebuild the frames you already started. Crashing, on the other hand, always costs more money, but the risks are different. They're more about managing team burnout and making sure you maintain safety standards. Now, before you start rearranging your schedule or authorizing overtime, listen up. There is one golden rule you absolutely must follow. Because applying these powerful techniques to the wrong tasks, it's like trying to make a car go faster by polishing the hubcaps. It might look like you're busy, but it does absolutely nothing to get you to your destination any sooner. And that rule is all about understanding something called the critical path. The best way to think about it is, well, imagine your project is a series of domino chains. The critical path is the longest single chain of dominoes from the start to the finish. Even if you make all the shorter chains fall instantly, the project isn't done until that final domino in the longest chain has tipped over. So here's the bottom line, the most important takeaway. If you want to shorten your project's total timeline, you have to find a way to shorten that longest chain of dominoes. Speeding up any task that's not on the critical path, will just increase your cost or your risk for absolutely zero gain on the final delivery date. It's just wasted effort.
All right, let's talk about money. Let's move to the price of speed, and we'll focus specifically on crashing here. Because crashing means spending money, you have to be surgical about it. The goal isn't just to spend more, it's to invest every single dollar where it will buy you the most amount of time. You're really looking for the biggest bang for your buck.
And that leads to the million-dollar question for any manager in this situation. You've got a limited budget to speed things up. You've got, say, 3 critical tasks you could possibly crash. Which one do you pick? How do you make that call based on data, instead of just a gut feeling?
Well, thankfully, there's a tool for exactly that, the cost slope formula. Now, it might look a little intimidating, but the idea behind it is actually really simple. All it does is calculate the price to save one single unit of time, like 1 day, for any given task. The task with the lowest cost slope is your most cost-effective target. That's your best investment right there.
And this formula lets you follow a really methodical process. First, you find the critical path. Then, you find the cheapest task on that path to crash. You crash it just a little, maybe by 1 day, and then, and this is the most important part, you stop and recalculate everything, because shortening one task might have just created a brand new critical path. You just repeat that loop until you hit your target.
See, the goal here isn't just to finish early at any cost. It's to find that economic sweet spot. As you crash, your direct costs, like labor and materials, they go up. But your indirect costs, like site administration, they go down because the project is shorter. The optimal point is where those two lines cross and the total project cost is at its absolute lowest. Pushing past that point just means you're burning cash.
So far, we've covered a lot of the how, but now we really need to talk about the should, because pushing for speed, especially without really careful management, isn't a strategy. It's a recipe for disaster.
This quote, it really captures the danger here. When it's handled poorly, schedule compression stops being a calculated risk and just becomes a desperate gamble. And that intense pressure to move faster and faster can create a level of chaos and inefficiency that can actually sink the entire project.
And the consequences of that gamble are very, very real. When people are rushed, safety protocols get overlooked. The quality of the work drops, leading to defects and really costly rework later on. Your teams get exhausted, morale plummets, and the stress poisons relationships with everyone involved. And the ultimate irony? A desperate rush to finish early can cause errors that lead to even bigger delays.
And you absolutely cannot escape a fundamental law of economics, the law of diminishing returns. The idea that you can solve any delay by simply throwing more people at the problem is a dangerous, dangerous myth. After a certain point, adding more people doesn't just stop helping, it actively starts hurting.
This chart shows you exactly what I'm talking about. Doubling your team from 2 workers to 4 gives you a huge productivity boost. But look at what happens when you double it again to 8. The gain is tiny. And why is that? It's because now everyone spends more time coordinating, communicating, and just plain trying to stay out of each other's way. The overhead starts to outweigh the actual benefit.
So in the end, when you boil it all down, it comes back to this one fundamental choice. With fast tracking, you're making a calculated bet. You trade certainty for speed, and you accept a higher risk of having to do things over. With crashing, you're basically making a purchase. You trade money for speed, and you accept the certainty of a higher cost. Neither path is free. You're always trading something to gain time.
And that leaves us with the final, critical question that any project manager has to ask themselves. Okay, you did it. You hit the new deadline. But what was the true cost? Not just in the budget, but in the quality of the final product, in the well-being of your team, and in the safety of your workplace. Gaining speed is a technical challenge. Understanding its real price, well, that's a measure of true leadership.